Hi, welcome to my filthy disaster heap of a garage. We're going to do something a little different today. We're not going to be reviewing any model kits, we're not going to be looking at any interesting model features, we're not going to be doing anything model related except very peripherally. A couple of weeks ago I showed off a rack that I had made for displaying my model runners while they're under construction. It was made out of a simple 2 by 3 inch board with some dowel pegs. I need a couple more of those, so we're going to make one. This is a 4 foot, it's actually 50 inches long, length of 2 by 3. And we are going to use my trusty table saw and hopefully not cut my fingers off. And cut this into 2 pieces, and we're going to use my drill press to put some peg holes in it. And then we are going to actually make it into a rack. So this should be fun. Alright, so measuring tape, but I've got my mechanical pencil. This is a 50-inch piece of wood, so I'm going to cut it evenly at 25 inches. I actually have a table saw sled for just this purpose, but I decided not to use it because it's a little bit cumbersome. Alright, so that is now 2 roughly even length pieces of wood. They're off by about 1 millimeter. Doesn't need to be too precise. But I'm going to use my pencil here. I'm going to run a line down the center. Let's see, maybe it's one side. Yes, I'm going to use this side because this side has a knot right there, and there's a chance that I might end up drilling into that based on its position. But I'm going to use this as a reference for a line, since I don't have a straight edge and my pencil just broke. There. It's not perfectly down the center, but it's close enough. And do the same on this side, and we will get ourselves a more or less straight line to use as a guide when I go use the drill press. Now, we have 25 inches to work with. I'm going to set the first peg at both ends at about 1 inch from the end of the board. So that actually gives us about 23 inches to work with. I want to have 13 pegs down the length of this. So, who the hell said you weren't going to have a calculator with you at all times? 23 divided by 13. 1 3/4 inches. We want to set our spacing at 1 3/4 inches along this line. The pegs that I'm going to be using, which I've already cut, are 3/8 inch in diameter, which is basically a little bit more than 1/4 inch, and that's going to leave me with about 1.5 inches of space between pegs, which is probably about optimal. That's plenty of space that I can that a single runner will fit. It's not going to be too thick. They're not going to lean too hard, and they're with the tall pegs like this, it'll support them nice and high, so they'll be less likely to tip over. That was a problem with my earlier design. Was I used short pegs, 3-inch pegs, and they kept kind of tipping over. You know, the short pegs weren't quite high enough to reach a crossbar in the runner, and they kind of just leaned all over the place. So that's why I'm going with the longer pegs on this revised design. But yeah, with a 1.5 inch spacing between, you're not going to find too many runners where the parts themselves are wider than 1.5 inches. I think I've seen maybe a handful of models where that's been the case. But generally speaking, most of your runners are going to fall within that 1.5 inch thickness. So you're not going to have too many cases where you're going to run into trouble. So starting at our 1 inch, we're going to go 1 3/4, and then so that's one board. It's not 100% perfect. I've got a little bit wider spacing on here, so I might just, when I actually go to drill these, give them a little bit more room than that, or I might offset this one back by a little more than an inch, just to kind of make it up. So that's one measured out. Now I'll do the other one, and hopefully get them pretty consistent between them. Alright, so that is now both of them measured out. Now what else we're going to need is to run some cross bracing. So the way I had these done prior in my original design was I had two set like so, with a third one down the middle for a little extra structural support, but I decided to remove the third one because it was just too much extra weight. It was a pain to actually attach them together, because getting all the peg holes lined up was somewhat difficult. But essentially I'm going to need, I would say, 4 pegs running across the width of the gap. So I'm going to want to have one peg on either end set a little bit closer to the end. I don't want a full gap here, so I'm going to set the first peg at, say, 3 inches from the end. So we're going to put one peg right here, and then one peg right here. I'm not going to bother to actually physically measure. I'm just going to have them compared against one another so that they make sure that they line up. And I'll put the other two, say, right here. I'm just doing this kind of quick and dirty. I'm doing it better than I did my first ones, that's for sure, because those ones I didn't even measure. But this, at least now I'll have a baseline so I can set the drill press and actually put a hole so that they'll line up correctly with each other. So now that we've got the board cut and the hole positions set up, we'll head over to the drill press and try that out. So I've already got my drill press set. I've got my 3/8 inch drill bit. I've got my depth set so that it'll go about a little over ½ an inch into the wood. I don't want it to go all the way through, and I want it to be a consistent height so that all the pegs are at basically the same height to each other. So now we're just going to use the line as a guide point and the little hash marks that we made as a reference for where to actually put our holes. And there. You can see the pegs are a perfect fit. And they stick up nice and high. Runners will lean real nicely on those. Alright, so that is all of our peg holes now in place, and because I can't math, I've actually got 14. So yeah, that's actually room for one extra runner. And since the other board will match in terms of placement, it just means that I'll be able to hold one extra runner. As long as we've got this board here, though, we might as well do the holes for the side, which I'm going to keep the depth the same. Since the drill head goes down the same distance, it'll drill farther into the wood horizontally because it's thicker in this dimension. In this case, I just eyeballed it in terms of where on the vertical side the peg holes would go. But since there's more span here, I'll have a little more flexibility in terms of like literal exact placement of the holes. So if they're offset by a little bit, it won't matter so much because I'll be able to flex them a little bit. I do have a problem. I have two holes here that kind of matched up with each other. So I'm either not going to be able to push this peg all the way in or this one all the way in. And since these pegs are the basis for the horizontal width of the unit, I'm kind of going to have to just deal with this peg being a little bit taller. But hey, you know, not everyone can be perfect. That was my own fault for not measuring out where I put the this hole, this hash mark. I should have moved it over a little bit. So now that's one half done. Let's do the other half, and then we can put this sucker together. There we go. That's both boards now done. Now we can go assemble it. Alright, so now we can do our first test assembly. We'll take our pegs. I need 4 horizontal pegs and line those up with the holes on the other side. And there we go. Fits almost perfect. Now we can take all of the additional pegs. I'm not going to have enough because I had a total of 16 of the tall pegs, and I probably have 13 of the short pegs, but I'll do as much as I can, and we'll see at least a rough idea of how this is all going to go together. And then I'll know how many more pegs I'm going to need and how much more dowel rod I'm going to need to buy. Oh, look at that. I will actually have quite a bit more of the short stuff than I'm going to need. I think I had enough for 2 of these actually in the short pegs. So we will fake it and put 2 short ones in over here and just pretend. And there. That is now a assembled runner rack. Too bad I don't have any runners to actually put in it, but I've got some cardboard. And that leaves me with a total of 13 slots on this rack for runners. So that's enough for just about any master grade. If I have a second one of these, that'll be enough for just about any perfect grade, save for the absolute largest of them. I mean, even with 2 of these, I'm not going to have enough for my perfect grade Zeta Gundam when I get around to building it in a few weeks. But this is a pretty good proof of concept. I like it. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup on it. I'm going to disassemble it, and I'm going to hit it with my palm sander and clean up the rough surface of the wood. This is my Ryobi palm sander. I'm just going to give it a quick swipe on all sides of each board just to kind of smooth out the rough edges, because this is pretty rough, unfinished wood. There. Ta-da! So yeah, I think that looks a lot better. With the bit of sanding, it's clean, it's smooth, there's no sharp edges, it's not going to poke you. That said, some of the dowels I kind of need to clean up the ends on. All I did was score and snap them because I didn't have a saw handy that I was able to use. I didn't want to come all the way out here just to bust out the chop saw. But yeah, I think this is a much better design than my original 2 prototypes. I'm definitely going to make at least one more. I really like it. I think the higher back set of pegs is a much better design than having the uniform 3-inch pegs. I do need to get a couple more of the taller ones just because, yeah, I ran out. But overall, it's very sturdy, it's very stable, it doesn't twist, it sits flat. You know, on a nice flat surface, it's not going to rock around or rattle around, and it can accommodate up to the largest runners. And if you have any runners that are even bigger than this, pull a peg out, you've got extra room. Disassembles very easily, though if you wanted to, you could, you know, glue it together with some carpenter's glue. I won't be, because I need to be able to travel with these. I'm real happy. I'm really, really happy. So now I just got to give them like a wipe down and clean off all the dust, because there's a lot of dust on this after hitting it with the sanding. But yeah, I'm definitely going to make at least one more, maybe two more of these. So I got to get to the hardware store and pick up some wood. If you like this design, feel free to make your own. Let me know if you do. If you build one and you like it, or if you have any improvements on the design that you'd like to share, feel free. I will happily credit you. Yeah, so thank you everyone out there for watching. Happy woodworking.